Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Today we have a very special guest, Mr. Senior Advocate Rajiv Dutta, sir. We are proud to present season 2 of the Lawyers with Lecture series. Today's webinar is brought to you in collaboration with the Virtual Lawyer. Over the course of this month, we will be conducting a number of webinars on all relevant topics of law. And today is a especially interesting one, sports law in India. And I'm proud to present the webinar today by Mr. Rajiv Dutta, sir, a very honored member of the bar. And without much further ado, I'd like to give on the mic now and the spotlight to Mr. Dalveen Singh Nanda to give an introduction about sir.
Good evening, everyone. Mr. Rajiv Dutta, Senior Advocate, practices at the Supreme Court of India and has over 40 years of experience at the legal bar across a spectrum of constitutional, civil, commercial, ADR, and criminal litigations. He has acted as an arbitrator under the United Nations Commission on International Trade Law Model Rules and also in ICC International Commercial Arbitrations. He has also qualified as a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators, London. At present, he is a member of the Singapore International Arbitration Center's panel of arbitrators and also a panel of arbitrators at the SCBA International Council of Alternate Dispute Resolution, New Delhi, the Indian Council of Arbitration, as well as Delhi International Arbitration Center. He is a Supreme Court trained and duly certified mediator, actively involved with the conduct of mediations at the Supreme Court Mediation Center. He is the country representative for India at the International Bar Association Mediation Committee. He was a member of the IBA Mediation Committee for drafting IBA rules for investors' state mediation. He has been appointed as a Vice Chair of the Sports Law Committee of the International Bar Association. He has been appointed to the panel of arbitrators of Pacific International Arbitration Center, Vietnam. He has also acted as a visiting professor, comparative law, under the Senior Lawyers Program of the Center for International Legal Studies, Salzburg, Austria, at the Pulaski University, Faculty of Law, Olomouc, Czech Republic, in spring 2016. He has been elected as a Vice President of the Bar Association of India and is a former elected Vice President of the Supreme Court Bar Association. Over to you, sir. Mr. Rajiv Dutta.
Thank you so much, Dalveen, for such a long introduction. And good evening, everybody, all the participants. And let me at the outset say that today we are going to deal with a subject which is connected, of course, with sports. And sports is what everybody, I think most of us not only play, but also enjoy. It is also a source of a lot of entertainment now. And it has a special place now in the field of law. So I will be taking you through, in the beginning, I will take you through a couple of slides because law, as far as the sports law is concerned, it has a structured, it is now structured in such a way that we have to first understand what are the basic norms which are now prevalent as far as the sports law is concerned. And as you all know, the topic today is future of sports law in India. So therefore, may I just ask Govind to first put up the slides so that I can take you through the slides and we can understand as to what is there to understand basically which is connected with sports as far as law is concerned. Can I have the first slide, please? At the very outset, I want to first introduce you to a very famous quotation by a very well-known personality who said, "Sports is a language every one of us can speak. It is more about inclusion and participation than about winning and losing." This was said by Ban Ki-moon, former UN Secretary General. And you can see in this quotation how beautifully he has summarized as to what is sports and how it affects everybody. Can I have the second slide, please? It is important for us at the outset to first understand what is the definition of sports, because now we are now in the realm of defining as to how we proceed and go on to the road to understand what is this mechanism or what is the science behind sports. So interestingly, as you can see, the word sports has been defined in various ways by authors, legislations, sports bodies, and experts. However, the safest route is to see how it is ordinarily understood. Accordingly, Webster's dictionary defines sports as any activity or experience that gives enjoyment or recreation, part-time, diversion. Such an activity requires more or less rigorous bodily excursion according to some traditional form or set of rules, whether outdoors as football, hunting, golf, racing, etc., or indoors as bowling, squash, etc. So what is important here is that it does not have a set definition, but definitely you would notice that as it is commonly understood is the best way to view it, and it is something which has been defined in the dictionary as an activity or experience that gives enjoyment or recreation. And I think that is the basic fundamental of sports. No doubt it has grown into a very big business world, and it has become almost a business, but activity and experience which gives enjoyment and recreation. Now, this is the fundamental definition of sports, as you can see. Can I have the second slide, please? Now that we have understood and have seen how sports is defined, we should now, in my opinion, straight away go to and understand what is the connection of law with sports. So what is sports law? Let us try and understand. Sports law, as you can see, basically deals with issues that arise during the preparation for or execution of sports events. It deals with relationships between and activities of individuals and institutions in the sporting world. Sports law is a mixture of private law and public law. See, I gather that most of you who must be participating in this webinar are, of course, connected with law, and maybe you are lawyers and are also interested in this subject. So therefore, you all understand what is the difference between private law and public law. So let me read further. Most regulation of sports federations are imposed through implied contractual relationships, but after UNESCO Convention Against Doping, it also now has developed a flavor of international law. Since many countries have promulgated specific statutes to deal with sports, it has leaning of public law. So as you can see, that you can also see there is a diagram over here which shows you as to how many facets the sports law can have. This is of course not absolutely complete, but you can just have a view as to incorporation, duty of care, disciplinary hearings, intellectual property, funding, contracts, consumer protection. As we go on, you will then understand as to how big an arena or field it has carved out for law and lawyers. Can I have the third slide, please? Now, after we have understood as to the definition of sports and what is the sports law, the next important thing, according to my opinion, is to understand what is sports law as we are continuing to understand it, as I told you earlier also, that it is a mixture of private and also public law. So just kindly allow me to place this slide before you now. It is a mixture of criminal law. Now see how many facets it has. Contract law, torts, public and administrative law, property law, competition law, fiscal law, human rights, all have been applied to it. Further, also laws relating to drugs, public or safety discipline measures, trade law, anti-competitive law, and commercial exploitation of sports. Then sports law jurisprudence is therefore evolving. As you must have noticed by now, that few years back, we did not have much knowledge about how the sports and law are emerging and how they are connected. But today we see it is a complete science in itself, and therefore sports law jurisprudence is evolving. Over the years, as we have just seen, it is something which is growing. Now kindly see the next para. Globalization, no, can I go back to this? Yes, thank you so much. Globalization of sports law as Lex Sportiva means basically that international federations are legally immune from regulations by national legal systems. This allows private regimes like IOC or FIFA to be legally unaccountable except through arbitration system. Let me delve on this a little more. See, what is very important for us to know is that every country internationally has their own laws. So therefore, how do the international federations frame their rules, regulations, and how do they solve the disputes which arise from the rules, etc., which they have carved out for the sports persons in the world? So the most basic thing is that they have been made immune from regulations by national legal systems. So international federations are immune from national legal system. It's something very basic, and we have to understand this. And the solution as to how they will be able to solve their problems has been carved out through arbitration system. As we go on, you will understand more about it, and therefore I have also stated that the International Olympic Committee and FIFA, the Football International Federation, they are legally unaccountable to any national legal system, but only through arbitration, which is it's a system which is absolutely an agreement between parties that they will abide by whatever is the decision by the arbitrators, and the arbitrators will of course apply the rules and regulations of the international federations. Can I have the next slide, please? Now, after having understood the definition of sports and also having understood as to what is sports law, let us now go a little closer to our topic. What is the state of sports law in India? It is something which we have to understand very basically if we have to understand as to how legally in India people are understanding and solving problems related to sports. In India, sports is listed under entry 33 of list 2 of the 7th schedule of the Constitution of India, which reads as theatres and dramatic performances, cinemas, subject to provisions of entry 60 of list 1, sports, entertainments and amusements. So just see that it is something which is included in list 2 of the 7th schedule, and therefore it is in the state list. Let us read further. States, by reason of legislation cannot confer on it extraterritorial jurisdiction in relation to sports, entertainment, etc. But every state can have some jurisdiction, has the jurisdiction to deal with sports in their territory, but they cannot confer extraterritorial jurisdiction in relation to sports on others. That also, I think, lawyers will be able to understand very clearly. The next, education, however, is in the concurrent list, being item number 25 of list 3 of the 7th schedule. Sports has been considered to be part of education in India and therefore has been included in human resource development as an extended part of education. So therefore, now you can see as to how we are treating sports in India, not as sports which is included entirely in entry 33, isolated word as sports, but it is included in the subject of education, and it is considered as a resource, as a human resource development in India. So this is the very basic fundamental law which we have to understand, if we have to understand as to how sports has to be understood in the realm of law in India. Can I have the next slide, please? Further, let us also understand how Union of India has stepped in legally and how it is dealing with and making all the policies with regard to sports in India. Now, let's read. Union of India, in exercise of its executive function, in terms of allocation of business rules framed under Article 77 of the Constitution of India, has created a separate Ministry of Youth Affairs and Sports, which coordinates between activities of different states. But in international arena, it is only the Union of India which can exercise such power in terms of entry 10, list 1 of 7th schedule of the Constitution of India. I think everyone who knows a bit of the Constitution would understand this, that internationally, only the Union of India can deal with foreign powers, etc. Entry 10 is provided, therefore, in list 1. Let us read further. Therefore, Union of India has requisite legislative competence in terms of entry 97, list 1 of the 7th schedule of the Constitution of India. So you also very well understand as to what is entry 97. Matters which are not included in list 2 and list 3, they are always dealt with by in the union list. Next, Union of India issues guidelines to presidents, secretary generals, Indian Olympic Association, and presidents, honorary secretary generals of all recognized sports federations. So this is basically the structure which is existing, the legal structure, the fundamental basic legal structure which is existing in India with regard to what is the basis on which the sports as law will have to be understood in India. Now, kindly, can I have the next slide, please? Having understood as to what is sports law, and what is how sports law is treated in India, what is the genesis and what is the basis of law, the structure which exists in the Constitution, and who are empowered to deal with sports. Let us now understand and see which are the sports bodies which are existing in India, and these bodies, how they function. The first one, as you see, is the Ministry of Sports. Now, Ministry of Youth Affairs and Sports is what it is known as. As I already explained to you earlier, that Union of India has the power and under the Constitution, and in the realm of education, they are dealing with the subject of sports. Now, this is very important ministry which has been set up, Ministry of Youth Affairs and Sports, by the Government of India. It was set up in 1982. The Department of firstly as the Department of Sports. Then in the year 2000, it was made an independent ministry. What are the basic aims of this ministry? Fundamental basic aims. We'll not go much into detail because we have to just understand the structure as to how the sports bodies in India, what are they, how do they exist, and which is the area or arena in which they operate. So the first aim of this ministry is to improve India's position in the world ranking. So they do a lot of deliberation and work on improving India's position in the world ranking. We all know that as far as internationally India is concerned, barring a few sports, we are still a very big growing nation, and there is a lot of pressure and demand that our youth should also participate and grow in other sports than in which we are already successful. So improving India's position in the world is the first foremost task of the Ministry of Youth Affairs and Sports. The second most important work that this ministry does is supporting federation policies. Now, we will slowly have to understand that in India, the structure of sports from the grassroots level, from the district level to the state level and to the national level is run by the state federations, which are formed for each and every sport. And therefore, the ministry does this support work for making and guiding these federations and supporting them in the policy making. Then the third most important aim of the ministry is creating infrastructure capacity building. Now we all know that sports is something which requires a lot of wherewithal. It requires a lot of infrastructure, and that has to be built, which of course there was a grave need in this country to build that structure, because after partition we were not having very many sports arenas, we were not having a lot of infrastructure. So this ministry is basically doing this work. Now let's go to the next body, which is an important body which works and does exclusive work for furtherance of sports governance in India, and that is Sports Authority of India, which is commonly and famously known as SAI, SAI. Now, what is the main purpose and aim of SAI? This was set up as a society of the Department of Sports in the Government of India. What is the aim? The aims of SAI are mainly promotion of sports stadias. Now, therefore, as you have understood and we have been through what is the aims that the ministry deals with, now SAI deals with the stadias. You know, of course, we are sitting in Delhi. Many of us are sitting in Delhi. We know how many stadiums are existing, how these stadiums came up, how these stadiums are to be, what is the upkeep of these stadiums, and how are they to be used. Like, for example, the famous ones, Jawaharlal Nehru Stadium, and etc. all Indira Gandhi, etc., all the great stadiums. And of course, the biggest one that we have is Dhyan Chand Stadium at India Gate. Then what does the SAI do? SAI maintains and also makes use of these stadiums available, and use of these stadiums by the sports persons, and makes it available to them, including all complexes in India. Now, one of the most important institute which has been created under SAI is the National Institute of Physical Education and Sports at Patiala. We all know all our top athletes, they train at Patiala under the aegis of National Institute of Physical Education and Sports in Patiala. Next, the next important body that governs sports in India is the National Sports Federations. And these national sports federations, which I have already mentioned to you. They are approximately 56 in number, and they basically frame their policies, etc. They also frame up the structure as to how the sports is to be managed and run in the country. They come out with programs as to how the events are to take place, how selections are to be done. They train coaches, etc., etc. And this is at the national level. Then we also have the state Olympic associations for each state separately. They are basically working in consonance with the Indian Olympic Association. And as I already said, the Indian Olympic Association is after SAI. Indian Olympic Association, I think I just missed on that. Indian Olympic Association is something which is very, very important to us, and we must understand the onus of preparing athletes for Olympic Games, Asian Games and Commonwealth Games is the task which is given to the Indian Olympic Association. And IOA has formed two very important things, two very important bodies which we must keep in mind and have to understand. The first one is the Athletics and Athletes Commission, Ethics Commission, and an Arbitration Commission. Although much work needs to be done on these Ethics Commission and the Arbitration Commission, which have been set up by Indian Olympic Association, they are working on it. I think the work is going on for a number of years, but still, who are the people who have to represent these bodies, etc. Selections have to be made. And then, as I already dealt with national sports federations and the state Olympic associations for each state separately, let me now go to the next one, which is the Board of Control for Cricket in India. I don't think this is something which has to be explained in detail, because we all know cricket is the leading sport in India, which is being managed by the Board of Control for Cricket in India, and it emerged as a society registered under the Societies Act. But ultimately, we will, as we proceed, I will come to and I will explain to you that now, as far as law is concerned, it has been declared that BCCI is a public body and can be sued and can be and a petition can be filed against it as a state, which of course is something which we will come to when we deal with the judgments which have been pronounced by the courts. And BCCI basically is a body which deals with the entire structure of how, and it owns stadias in India. At the moment, it is very interesting. We are just today on the 20th of September, and yesterday we all know that IPL has begun, and it is now, this time it could not happen in India because of COVID, and of course it is happening in Dubai and Saudi Arabia. But BCCI is the one which manages it. It is also responsible for the players. It is responsible for it is a body which sets up and all the agreements which it has with the players. It is also responsible for their conduct, salaries, discipline, selection, etc., etc. Now, coming to the next body, the Sports Law and Welfare Association. It is very important that this body is the work of this body is something which is very important to us. And as far as lawyers are concerned, let me inform you why. Because the Sports Law and Welfare Association of India, which we call as SLAWIL, is a non-profit organization. It is a national. It at the national level. It is a non-profit organization. And what is its aim? The aim is advancement of ethical practice of sports law. So it is very close to what we are talking today. It is one body which has been created. And as I told you, it is at the national level. It is a non-profit making body. And it is involved with ethical practices of sports law. And also, one of the major aims of this body is to bring legal practitioners and sports persons together. So you can understand as to what is the grave importance of this body. It is something basically evolved only to bring legal practitioners and sports persons together, because as you know very well, sports persons at a very high level, they are not able to understand or know the complex legal situations that exist around them. For example, they don't even know if they are entering into an agreement, whether that agreement is a balanced agreement or not, and various other aspects of law. So therefore, it is it is this body which controls and brings the legal practitioners and sports persons together. Let me move on now. The Indian Premier League. I think not much is to be said about this. It is one of the premier leagues which is existing today as far as cricket is concerned, and manages the sport of cricket. And at the moment, as I mentioned already, yesterday we have started the IPL matches in Dubai and Saudi Arabia. Because of COVID, they could not happen in India. It was postponed earlier. And Indian Premier League also deals with the cricket at the level that it is being played as a league, which is other than the national cricket team that we have. Let me move on now to the next body, which is a very, very important body, and that is National Anti-Doping Agency, which is known as NADA. Now, NADA is a Indian doping agency, but it works under the aegis of WADA, which is the World Anti-Doping Agency. And lately, all of you must be reading or must be aware of the fact that doping has become a very big menace in the world of sports. India is also very badly affected by it. In fact, there have been various cases which have come up as far as Indian athletes are concerned. World over, also, it is very important that this menace is curbed, and the agency in India, let me tell you, is something in South Asia. The NADA is a very popular agency, because it is also serving a lot of other countries and tests the athletes, etc., who are found to be wanting, and they are tested for before every event. There is a proper doping test, etc., that is done, and that is all done and managed by NADA. And NADA, of course, is controlled by government. Can I have the next slide, please? Now, after having informed you with regard to the sports bodies, starting from what is the sports law in India, what is its basis, etc., and the sports bodies, let me quickly now take you through some of the important national sports policies which have been framed and are existing in India. The first resolution on the national sports policy was laid before both the houses of parliament in August 1984. This also incorporated National Education Policy 1986 objectives. So you can see how education has been mixed with the sports policy. Since 1984 policy could not achieve its objectives, the sports policy of 2001 was framed. Let's move further. The draft policy 2007, which was framed later, was the comprehensive national sports policy 2007, and was framed to achieve unfinished agenda and to address the emerging challenges of the 21st century. Next, the Sports Broadcasting Signals Mandatory Sharing Prasar Bharati Act 2007 was framed. As you know, we had a lot of problem with the uplinking and direct telecast of live sports in India, and therefore this body was created, and it is now functioning in India under the the legislation which is drafted, and you know that every broadcaster, whether it's a television, whether it's radio, they have to mandatorily share their signals with Prasar Bharati, which spreads them all over and at local level. So it is basically to improve the telecast of live events for the benefit of the citizens of India at the ground level. Next, the National Sports Development Code 2011 is something which is a very, very significant aspect of our webinar today, because I must inform you that this is the sports code which is now actually basically the sports code has been developed in consonance with and to uplift and bring in India and merge Indian sports regulations in consonance with the Olympic Charter. And therefore, this is the sports code which is now being debated and which is being, I mean, it is yet not made as a legislation. It is not an act so far, but it is something which, of course, legally, I can inform you that sports code has been upheld. There is a judgment of Delhi High Court where it has been upheld. So therefore, and there are matters pending. Slowly, I will come to that, pending in Delhi High Court also. Next, the most important thing that has emerged in the last few years in India is the Khelo India movement. Now, this is something which the government has originated to take games to the lowest rung of this strata of the society, to the village level, etc. And they are now being budgeted by the government of India extremely well. And therefore, this is to boost, give a big boost to the sphere of sports in India. You are also aware, and the next one, of course, is something which is very famously known and everybody is aware of, is the Yoga Day initiatives. This is to bring in the movement. This is to bring in the citizens of India a kind of an initiative and a physical awareness to move themselves forward from the lowest level to the highest level. Can I have the next slide, please? So these are the national sports policies which are prominent and which are important for you to know. Now, having discussed the basic structure which is existing from the word what is sports law, how it is treated in India, how the government and the basic legal structure that exists for the resolution of sports disputes or the sports law that exists in India. Let me now give you a few fundamental points which I think are very, very important, which you should all know, which have emerged and are existing in our society today, qua sports. The first and the most important thing you must have noticed that we have now, we have been independent for number of years, but do you know that till 2018, the budget of India, how much did it allocate for sports? And it is something which is startling. It is something which will leave a few of you aghast. Up to 2018, the expenditure on sports by government of India was to the tune of 3 paisa per capita on sports. It came down to only 3 paise per capita on sports. Now, this is something absolutely, very sad. And you can see the important thing that is clear from this is that how sports have been neglected in India for a very, very long time. At the moment, let me inform you, the things have become better. Of course, in the India's budget for sports in the present budget has increased to about rupees 2,826.92 crores, which is, I mean, it's almost about 3,000 crores. And most important over here is to note that there is a lot of money being put in by private sector also, and therefore the picture is not as rosy as it should be, because compared to other countries, for example, China, I mean, it's a country which we compare with because it is spending a huge amount on sports, and the per capita income in China is of course different from India, but they are spending almost, when I mentioned in 2018 it was 3 paisa per capita on sports. In China it is almost 200% more than that, which is absolutely I mean something, and we are expected to go and compete with people from and different countries have spent a lot of they spend a lot more money on sports than India. So one of the main things is that sports field in India, and the point that I want to make is it has been neglected for a very important for a very, very long time, and the situation, as I just mentioned, is changing, but very, very slowly. Now I come to a very important juncture, and I must mention to you that the development of sports law in India has been done at the courts level, and the courts in India have played a very significant role in the development of sports law in India. Let me just, because this is I mean something which we have constraint of time, but let me mention 2 judgments which are very, very important. One judgment is of Delhi High Court in the case of Ajay Jadeja versus Union of India. It is 95, volume 95, 2002, DLT, page 14. Now this judgment is a revolutionary judgment in terms of sports law in India, because this judgment dealt with legal reforms of sports in India. Now just see how judiciary came to the aid of sports in India, and the issues like lack of proper investigation, because this was a case where there was lack of investigation in the allegations made against the person, and primarily it was held in this case that sporting bodies perform public functions. Please keep that in mind. This is one of the most significant things which has happened. This judgment was upheld by Supreme Court in the next judgment that I'm going to mention, and that is Z Telefilms Limited versus Union of India, 2005, 4 SCC 649. So the sports bodies are doing public functions was first time held in the case of Ajay Jadeja. And let me tell you, most of us who were dealing with some sports issues and disputes, etc., were absolutely constrained, whether we were not able to decide as to whether we should go under a writ jurisdiction to the high courts for these. And for a long time, when even a writ was filed, it was to be debated as to whether a sports body is a public body against which a writ is maintainable. Now, the Sports Development Bill, which I mentioned to you, 2011, is something which is a very hot topic today in India. And it is basically something which is essential to this at the central sports movement. It is central to the sports movement in India, and now it is the IOA and the ministry both are working out that the sports federations in India, the national federations in India, should conform their constitutions, their bylaws, etc., all in consonance with the sports code. And at the moment in Delhi High Court, there is a case which is going on, which is of course sub judice at the moment, but the court has, the government at the first instance had cancelled the recognition of all the 56 national federations because they don't conform to the sports code. But now the case is going on, and one of the issues which arises is, and which is being debated in the courts, is with regard to the elections to these bodies. And you know how badly these elections are conducted, and what is the role played by various bodies and various vested interests, I would say, in the making of these bodies. So let us await and let us see. The most important thing that this code is going to bring about is that the sport bodies have to be transparent. Their elections have to be transparent. That they have to conform to the right to information. Therefore, there is a big reluctance by these federations, which have been doing all their work for all these years, which is without following these basic fundamental rules which pertain to transparency. Now, one of the most important things which is coming up in India, I would like to add here and discuss with you, is the Prevention of Sports Fraud Bill 2013. You are all aware of the fact that when these controversies arose with regard to IPL, at that time it was not even clear as to how and under what law will these people who are doing these scams will be penalized. So you know, in Bombay, the aid of the Indian Penal Code, etc., was taken, and some other stringent laws were applied. But there was no legislation which could be applied and followed. So there is something which is in the pipeline and which will come very shortly. That is Prevention of Sport Fraud Bill. It has been introduced since 2013, but its need is highlighted now. And from, as I mentioned, from match fixing, etc., it is something which will cover all that. And this is one legislation we are all awaiting. The next point I want to make is that you are all aware, in the BCCI case, the Supreme Court and even the Bombay High Court prior to Supreme Court constituted the Justice Mukul Mudgal Committee, which gave a lot of suggestions as to how we should go about the prevention of this match fixing, etc. And then the matter was finally taken to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court constituted the LODA panel. And LODA panel also gave its report, which is now something which the Supreme Court has applied. And it is something which is now forms of fundamental suggestions which have been given by these committees as to how we should deal with these issues. Now, one important thing that I have mentioned earlier, and it is with regard to elections in the national federations. You all know sports in India is not free from politics. Even at the national level, political leaders have used sports to promote nationalism and also their political agendas. This is something which we all are very familiar with. So right from the independence, they formed many committees. But what was the main agenda? The agenda was political. It was not paying attention to sports. And now it is noticed that sports law has gained momentum in India, but the need of the hour seems to be that we must have an independent legislation. We must have an independent sports law. There are, again, I must mention, India is something very peculiar, because there are two states in India which have formulated sports law. The first state was the state of Kerala, and the second state is the state of Rajasthan. So both these states could think of and evolve a legislation which is to deal only with sports, and we are at national level still stuck, and we are not able to bring about a sports law. except for the Prasar Bharati Act that I mentioned. But otherwise, there is a grave need in this country for bringing a sports law which will deal with, of course, it can also deal with recreation. Many countries in this world have a sports law which deals with recreation and sports. And, betting, etc., doping, as I mentioned already. These are some of the issues which can only be resolved if there is a proper legislation, if there is a proper enactment by the parliament. And this has to be brought about by involving not only administrators in sports, but the sports persons themselves. It is a very heartening thing that sometime back we had the first law minister who was an athlete, an Olympian who became the sports minister. So there is a movement which is going on, but for a country which is the size of India, it is something we should move a little faster, and we should come to the decisions quickly, more quickly. And that's what I say. I also want to add here that as far as I am, in my opinion, internationally, see, today we have not discussed in this webinar, of course, that was not the topic, as to how international bodies are working. But it is something very important, that what is in our mind, what do we propose as a resolution, because courts cannot handle all this. Courts have been very forthcoming, but it is an amazing fact that when you move a petition in the court, the judges are so bogged down with their own work. They have to resolve so many disputes, and in comes a dispute which is about a federation not selecting a person who is dropped in the selection of Asian Games or Commonwealth Games or Olympics also. So the courts, and then the problem with the courts is they have so many technical requirements. Replies have to be filed, counters, rejoinders, government, IOA, and the ministry, etc., etc., etc. And this is process which goes on. So what is the resolution? The resolution is, as I mentioned earlier, ADR, alternate dispute resolution, in the form of arbitration, mediation. It is time tested. We know about the international body, which is the Court of Arbitration for Sports in Lausanne, in Switzerland. It is interesting that most of these sports bodies in this world have their head offices in Switzerland. The answer to that is because Switzerland has some very defined laws, and they feel very safe over there. So what is very important is that, in my opinion, we should form, see, for example, we have now NGT, which resolves disputes with regard to the environment. But it's not that we should evolve. I mean, we can have a tribunal for sports, a national tribunal for sports we can have. But again, over there, it will be an adversarial exercise where we will have people coming in and it will also proceed on the basis of there will be some procedural aspects, etc., which of course will be there even in arbitration. But we must, for sports, come out with arbitration for sports. And that is something we can straight away look in the eyes of CAS, as I said. CAS, the Court of Arbitration for Sports in Lausanne, which is the final authority which deals with these matters. The most important thing about CAS is they decide these disputes within hours of the dispute being referred to them. And that is the need of the hour. Please visualize a situation where an international event is going on. For example, boxing. If an event is going on in Asian Games, Commonwealth Games, or for that matter in Olympics, and there is some problem which has arisen, a dispute has arisen, who will resolve that dispute? Before the event is over, I mean, before the games conclude, or before that medal is awarded. I must at this juncture mention to you that I myself filed a petition in the Delhi High Court when Sarita Devi, who is one of the leading boxers of India, was denied the proper medal which she must have, which she has won, according to me, and according to many people. Not only because we are Indians, we thought that, but many people in the world also thought that she had won. And what she did was, at the podium, when she was being given a medal, she handed over that medal. She took the medal, but she gave it to the other person. That I'm not going to take this medal. I don't accept it. She was penalized for 2 years by the International Federation. And that ruined her career. 2 years for a boxer not to practice or participate in events. So what did I as a sports lawyer, I felt absolutely very disheartened. So I filed a writ petition in Delhi High Court, because I was informed that the government of India did not file an appeal before CAS, because government of India itself thought that there is no appeal which can be filed against that order passed by the international body, International Federation. That writ petition was debated in Delhi High Court for a number of years, not like 10 or 15 years, but for about 3 years. And then Delhi High Court finally gave a judgment. It issued a mandamus in my case to the government of India to consider that there should be added a CAS clause. Now, what is a CAS clause? The Court for Arbitration for Sports only entertains appeals if you have that in your constitution. So Government of India was directed that they should consider and have it. And a meeting was set up between me and the sports secretary. I went and met the sports secretary. We debated everything, but till today, that has not been done. So according to me, coming back to our point, I think we must evolve an ADR system for resolution of sports disputes in India. And that is what will solve the problem quickly, and the disputes will be resolved very, very quickly. Now, one of the important things which I want to mention here is that the present debate which is going on in Delhi High Court, the matter is sub judice in the case of Rahul Mehra versus Union of India. In fact, just on 17th, an interim order passed in that matter was challenged by the government in the Supreme Court of India. There has been some modification of that interim order, but the matter is pending. And the Supreme Court noted in its order that it has been more than 10 years. This matter is pending in Delhi High Court. Now, we can't blame the courts for it, because the courts are doing their job. They are burdened. These matters should be resolved quickly by an alternate method. That is what my suggestion will be, and that, according to me, is the future of law, of sports law, and that is what will take the sports law forward in India if we have to bring it in par with the international world. Thank you so much. Are there any questions which you want to ask, Tarveen?
So thank you for such wonderful session, sir. There are 3 questions which I would like to ask you.
Yeah,
the first question is whether sports should be managed by the government, by the Indian government. That's the first question.
It's a very good question. I mean, it's a very fundamental and a very good question. See, the problem is in India, the country is, you see, we are a subcontinent. India is a huge country, and leaving it absolutely to private bodies is something which would have, see, today, as I told you, we have traveled after 1947 all these years, and we have achieved a very, very minimal progress. Of course, we are kings of cricket and we were kings of hockey, but today we are lacking. It's not always winning. I'm sorry, I'm not saying that we should always be winning, but are we competing at that level? That is very important. And we are growing. See how the participation of Northeast states has, and the women in particular, and from the South, the athletics, how it has improved. And let me tell you, the potential of this country has to be garnered. And who will garner it? See, the government is the one which is got the wherewithal, and the regulation can be kept with the government. But otherwise, all these bodies can be autonomous. They can see what is the purpose of sports code? That there should be transparency in their election, in their selection, in their dispute resolution. In fact, all these bodies must also have an internal dispute resolution mechanism, which they should, if there is a dispute between two athletes belonging to a particular federation, it should resolve its own disputes. Why should we go to the courts? But your question is Government of India. Yes, Government of India is very important for us, because you see the amount of money that is required for the wherewithal that we need for the sports. And as I mentioned, India is not Singapore. India is not a small country, and therefore government participation is a must. But government must do one thing: it only may regulate, it may not interfere. See, the government may not say, I want to send this athlete because, see, let's be very clear. The government has a various, not agendas, but the government operates at a very different level. So somebody may say, we must select people who are closely associated with the government of the day. That's not the point. Point is, we must have people who are independent. They must be allowed to work independently, but we must monitor them. Like, for example, BCCI. It was working itself, and you see what happened. The scandals, the match fixing. Who has to control all that? So therefore, government's involvement is very important in a country like India. See, China is controlling it. Many countries in the world do it. Of course, nobody becomes America overnight.
Thank you, sir. So the next question is that is ADR a positive route to resolve the sports disputes?
I think I already delved
I
on
think
it. It is very close
yes,
to my heart. I must tell you, if there is a small internal dispute, I mentioned small, or it can be a big dispute also. An internal dispute between a team or athletics or a team or any other team. And if they can sit down and do mediation between themselves, what is wrong with that? Why should we go to courts to resolve these disputes? See, people file civil suits, and you know what is the civil suit, how it proceeds, how and where it will lead to. Then the mechanism of ADR is the one which is quick and best, and then no appeals. After that, no appeals. This is the best system according to me. And see, world over, it is recognized. As I told you, the Court of Arbitration for Sports is the main body. It is also an independent body. Of course, it is funded hugely by America. So there is we are not debating that today over here. That is a separate topic to debate, whether it has a bias for the West and it is operating in with a bias because they fund it more. That's a separate issue. But look at the resolutions. They resolve the disputes very quickly. And one of the big athletes in India, I can name her, Duty Chand. She won an appeal in CAS, and a CAS appeal was won by her. And in the case of Sarita Devi, as I told you, nobody filed an appeal in CAS. So that route has to be taken. But then law is something our athletes who spend about 7 to 8 hours of practice every day, they are dependent on lawyers and they are dependent on legal advisors. You know, in IPL, every team has its own lawyer. It's a great future for lawyers. Sports law, sports science is a very big future for lawyers. So ADR is a very good method according to me.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. The third question is somewhat interrelated to what you've already told us, which is the method to resolve the disputes quickly. I think you've already addressed this question.
I think there cannot be a more quicker method. My only experience, as I can tell you from doing sports law cases in the courts, is that we should not burden the courts with these disputes. These disputes should be decided should be resolved at the federation level. They must have an internal mechanism, their own people to sit down and mediate and decide. And secondly, we should have some bodies. And let me also tell you, I'm aware of it. Many bodies are coming up. In fact, there are now online dispute resolutions. Like today, we are having a webinar online. We are also having our hearings in the courts online. There are now today bodies coming up, which may be private bodies, but they will be transparent. Whoever are their directors, whoever are their persons, they will be chosen from the angle that they are that competent to resolve the disputes. And then again, it is a system where both the parties agree that they will abide by the decision. And that's how we should proceed. That's how it should go on. Sports is a world which we should not complicate and take it to the courts and go and disturb the national courts for all these disputes to be resolved. It takes years and years. As I told you, Supreme Court just day before yesterday, on 17th, in the case of Rahul Mehra versus Union of India, has commented that the matter is pending for 10 years in the court. And it relates to sports code.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. At the end, I would just request you to give some advice to the young budding lawyers.
You want me to give advice? I must tell you, if they follow let me tell you, we who started our practices long back, we did not understand this structure, which I have explained to you for years. Now that structure is very well understood, you must see, how does it begin? For example, for a person to be interested in sports, you yourself play a certain sport and then you are taken away. You become a lawyer, you don't have time for it. I mean, very few people have time. I know many lawyers who go and play badminton in the evening or something like that. But let me tell you, in my case, I have pursued as a hobby. After I became a lawyer, you don't have so much of time. So at different times, you can pursue your hobbies. For example, I was always very attracted to horses in equestrian. I have played a very major role after becoming a lawyer also in the Equestrian Federation, because when they came to know, and when I was there regularly riding horses, etc., they came to know that I'm a lawyer. So legal disputes were all referred to me. So where do you make, and when you are saying what is the advice to lawyers is that lawyers must also have some kind of a window which may or a space which they must have for pursuing whatever they pursued as a hobby or a sport earlier in their lives. And I carried on doing that. And subsequently, a little later, I started playing golf. And we have a very good golf team in Delhi High Court. We have, in fact, we have golf lawyers, golf team, and golf as played by lawyers in most of the high courts. So it is something which you have to carve out for yourself. See, nobody is going to go, and in India, I know you and I cannot advertise that I'm a sports lawyer. We cannot do that. We are barred from doing that. But slowly, when people who are in need, they'll search you out. And at the end of it, the basic fundamental and the funda of any lawyer and the practitioner is hard work. I always say that a lawyer has only 3 things to do, and that is to do hard work, and hard work. Of course, you cannot stand up somewhere at some corner and say, I'm a sports lawyer, give me sports. But slowly, when you are driven towards that, as I told you, how I was in a federation doing a game. Actually, I was participating. Then they came to know I'm a lawyer. So they said, okay, this is a dispute. Give it to Mr. Dutta. He'll do it. So that's how my interest in sports always remained, and I carried it on as a part of my legal profession. And now today, see where it is going. And I must tell you, this field has a great future for lawyers. Because as I told you, sportsmen don't understand law. They need not. They don't have that much of time. A sports person at a higher level practices for 8 to 9 hours a day. Where is the time? and then they are dependent on you to tell them how to frame their agreements, whether they are fair, whether they are in consonance with law. I mean, and now you know how complicated it is becoming. It is becoming, like, for example, branding. Branding in sports is a big issue. In the judgment, in the Supreme Court judgment, you must read some. Did you say something? No, you must read the judgment delivered by Justice Sikri in the Prasar Bharati case. It's an eye opener. I mean, it's of course the legal point dealt with in that judgment mostly is interpretation of a statute, but still it is concerned with uplinking of live sports events in India, and it will be an eye opener. So all these cases which have the courts, as I told you, Delhi High Court led the way in Ajay Jadeja's case, and slowly the jurisprudence is evolving and growing and growing. So great future for lawyers. Tarveen?
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. Now I will request Janvi to give the vote of thanks. Janvi, over to you.
Yes, thank you so much, sir, for that. Truly, I mean, it was an enriching experience to hear you and to hear about sports law. I don't think most of us hear enough or even read enough about sports law. And like you said, I truly believe that it is a very upcoming field of law, and we need, specialized courts or alternate dispute resolution or something which is more structured to deal with sports law in India. And you have inspired, I think, a lot of young lawyers today to take up sports law as a specialization. And I think most of them will be coming to you only after courts reopen, asking for advice and, how they should approach their career in sports law. I would like to thank you on behalf of Divyanshu and Latest Laws. I would like to thank you on behalf of Tarveer Singh Nanda and the Lawyer's Wit. I would like to thank you on behalf of Professor Dr. Manjula Batra and the Virtual Lawyer. It has been our pleasure to have you here, to host you here. And we know you're very busy and you've taken out time for us on a Sunday evening. So we really thank you for that, sir. Thank you so much. And now I would request Govind to end today's webinar. Thank you.
Thank you for that,
Janvi. Thank you very much, Janvi. It's a pleasure. Of course, anybody who wants to know more about sports law is most welcome.
Yes, I'm sure a lot of them will be coming to you and they'll be like asking for your number, your email ID, how do we contact sir now?
Thank you so much.
So without much further ado, I now move on to give the vote of thanks to everyone involved in the making of this webinar through Mr. Rajiv Dutta sir on the future of sports law. I would like to thank our speaker, most importantly, Mr. Rajiv Dutta sir. Thank you for making the time. Thank you for coming here. Thank you for for preparing the slide, such an interesting slide, which was very informative and really got us an idea how sports law works and major intricacies. Like I learned a lot myself and all the different policies right from 1980s to 2000s and the new code that we're dealing with now. It's very interesting, and definitely all the law students and the budding lawyers which are looking at a field for specialization will now have one. Definitely they will get an idea on how where they can go towards and how they can work towards it. Definitely. I would also like to thank Mr. Tarveer Singh Nanda of Lawyers With. Thank you for arranging this, and I would further like to thank you on behalf of the Virtual Lawyer, and thanks you to the entire team that has made this happen. Thank you to Latest Laws also. And thank you, Rajiv sir, again. Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you, Govind. Thank you, Tarveen. Thank you, Janvi. Thank you very much. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.